I made the biggest mistake of my life when I decided to move into a nursing home. If you're thinking about this, listen to me before it's too late. I still remember the day I left my home, the place where I had spent almost my entire life. It wasn't a big house, but it held a lifetime of memories. I can still remember standing at the door, my hands trembling as I locked the old, familiar lock one last time. My family told me this was the best choice, that I would be well taken care of, that I wouldn't have to worry about heavy chores or being sick alone. I believed them, and I told myself I was doing the right thing. But when I stepped into the nursing home, I realized I hadn't just left my house, I had left behind the life I once had. The first morning I woke up here, I opened my eyes and stared at the stark white ceiling. There was no warm morning light filtering through familiar curtains, no birds chirping outside my window, no smell of freshly brewed coffee or baked goods that I used to make every morning. I turned over, trying to find the familiar comfort of my old bed, but all I saw was a strange room, four empty walls, and a silence that felt suffocating. At that moment, I realized everything had changed. I was no longer in control of my own life. I wanted to prepare my breakfast the way I liked, but meals were served at fixed times. I wanted to go outside for a walk and breathe in the fresh air, but I had to wait for staff permission and someone to accompany me. Even the smallest things, what I wanted to wear today, when I wanted to sleep, when I wanted to talk to someone, were no longer my decisions to make. But the most painful thing wasn't what I couldn't do. The most painful thing was that little by little I stopped being myself. I used to be a father, a grandfather, a neighbor who was always ready to help others. I used to have friends, I used to have stories to tell, I used to have a life I was in charge of. But here, I am just a number, a name on a list, an old man quietly waiting. Waiting for the next meal. Waiting for a phone call from my family. Waiting for another day to pass without anything really changing. At first, I told myself I just needed time to adjust. But the longer I stayed here, the more I realized I had lost more than I ever imagined. I didn't just lose my freedom. I lost my dignity. I lost my sense of purpose. I lost the feeling that I still mattered to someone. And then I came to a realization that was more painful than anything else. I had thought that if I didn't like it here, I could leave. But I was wrong. Hard truth number one. Losing your freedom. I used to think that losing freedom meant not being able to travel or drive. But I was wrong. Losing freedom isn't about the big things, it's about losing the right to make even the smallest decisions in your own life. On my first day at the nursing home, I woke up and instinctively reached for my favorite book, only to find nothing there. My bookshelf was gone. The cozy chair where I used to sit every night was gone. The keepsakes I had cherished for decades, gone. The room was empty, neatly arranged to meet the standards of a care facility. I tried to open the window to get some fresh air, but it was locked. I wanted to make myself a cup of coffee, but the kitchen wasn't mine. I decided to take a walk, but a staff member stopped me. You need someone to accompany you. That morning, I went to the dining hall. A tray of food was already placed in front of me, runny porridge and soft bread. I asked if I could choose something else. The staff member smiled, but her headshake was firm. This is today's menu, sir. I looked down at the bowl of porridge and a strange feeling hit me. This wasn't my breakfast. This wasn't what I had chosen. This wasn't my life. But the worst was yet to come. One afternoon, I wanted to sit outside under a tree and enjoy the cool breeze. I pressed the call button for staff assistance. No one came. 30 minutes passed, then an hour. Finally, a nurse appeared, checked her watch, and shook her head. Sir, it's late. You should rest now. I went back to my room, stared out the window, and I understood. I had lost. From that day on, I stopped asking. I ate when they told me to eat. I slept when they told me to sleep. I sat still when they told me to wait. I became part of the system, and that was the moment I lost myself. You think moving into a nursing home will make life easier? No. It only turns you into a prisoner for the rest of your days. Hold on to your freedom. Treasure every moment you still have control over your own life. Because once you lose it, you will never get it back. But losing freedom isn't even the worst part. Because when you lose your freedom, you also lose something even more painful. You lose the feeling that you still matter to someone. At first, I told my children that I was just trying it out. I thought that if life here didn't suit me, I could go back home. But then, I realized that leaving wasn't as easy as I had imagined. My old home had been sold. My belongings had been cleared out. And more importantly, my health was no longer the same. Days spent here made me less active, more dependent on help, and before long, I no longer had the confidence to take care of myself. Once you enter this place, leaving becomes nearly impossible. No one warned me. No one told me this harsh truth. And I don't want you to make the same mistake I did. 7 truths about nursing homes. Things that could forever change the way you see aging. If you think coming here will make life easier, stay until the end, because what I'm about to say may make you think twice. Hard truth number 2, the feeling of being forgotten. In the first few days at the nursing home, I still felt like I belonged to something. My phone would ring every evening, my daughter calling to check if I was eating well, my grandchild excitedly telling me stories about school, and I felt like I was still an important part of their lives. Every weekend, I looked forward to their visits. I would tidy myself up, sit patiently in the waiting area, eagerly watching the door for familiar faces. At first, they came regularly. My daughter would visit on Saturdays, bringing the cookies I loved. My grandchild would jump onto my bed, chatting about a math test or a school soccer game. Those conversations made me forget how unfamiliar this place felt. They reassured me that I was still loved, that I still mattered. But then, things started to change. The visits became less frequent. At first, there were apologies, work got busy, the weather was bad. Unexpected plans came up. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I'll make it up to you next weekend." I nodded, smiled, and said it was okay. But the next weekend, no one came. Then one day, the phone stopped ringing every night. I told myself my daughter must be busy, that my grandchild was probably stressed about an upcoming exam. I didn't want to bother them, didn't want to be a burden. But every night before bed, I would stare at the phone beside my bed, wondering if anyone remembered me today. One afternoon, I sat by the window from morning until evening, watching the road outside the nursing home. I had hoped to see my daughter's familiar figure, just like before. But all day long, no one came. No one at all. Loneliness started creeping into every corner of my mind. I looked around my room, the same room that used to be filled with laughter when my family visited. Now only silence remained. Empty chairs. Family photos on the shelf, but no one there to look at them with me. And that's when I realized a bitter truth. When you are no longer part of their daily lives, you slowly fade from their minds. Not because they don't love you anymore, but because life moves on and you are left behind. I used to believe that a family's love could overcome any distance, that they would never forget me. But reality was different. I don't blame them. I know life keeps people busy. But knowing that doesn't make the loneliness hurt any less. And do you know what the scariest part is? It's realizing that even if you disappeared, the world would continue as if nothing had ever changed. I don't want you to go through this feeling. Don't let yourself become just a name that's mentioned on holidays, a picture on the wall that no one stops to look at anymore. Don't wait for someone else to bring joy to you. Because if you don't actively build and maintain relationships, if you just sit there and wait, one day you will become nothing more than a fading memory in the minds of those you love. And when you are no longer part of their lives, you will start to wonder, do I even matter anymore? And that is when you lose something even more important than freedom, the very meaning of life. Hard truth number 3, losing the sense of purpose. Have you ever asked yourself what makes each day meaningful? A job, a hobby, or simply the feeling that someone still needs you. I used to believe that as long as I was alive, I would still be myself. But then I realized living without a reason, without anyone who needs you, without something to strive for, that is the true tragedy of old age. Before, every morning had purpose. I tended to my small garden, brewed my coffee just the way I liked it, and made breakfast exactly to my taste. I took my grandchildren to school, listened to their stories, and felt like I was still an important part of the family. Even the smallest tasks made me feel like I still mattered. But when I entered the nursing home, everything changed. Meals were brought to me, my bed was already made, my clothes were neatly washed. I didn't have to do anything, and no one needed me to do anything anymore. There was no garden to care for, no one to help. I was no longer a devoted father, no longer the grandfather my grandkids excitedly ran to after school. I was just an old man, sitting and waiting for time to pass. At first, I tried to fill my days. I read books, but the more I read, the more I realized that nothing changed after turning each page. I turned on the TV, but then I asked myself, why am I even watching? Just to kill time? Just to forget the fact that I no longer mattered to anyone? Here I met George. He used to be a talented carpenter, crafting intricate wooden pieces by hand. He had a small workshop where people came to him for custom work, a place where he felt valued. But now he just sat there, his empty hands resting on his knees, his eyes staring into the distance. I don't know what to do with these hands anymore. His words haunted me. I looked down at my own hands. They were still strong, still capable. But there was nothing left to do. No one needed me to do anything. And that was the moment I realized something even scarier than death itself. Living a life where you no longer matter to anyone. I once heard that people don't die from old age. They die when they no longer have a purpose to live. I never believed that until I experienced it myself. Death doesn't come all at once. It comes slowly, quietly. It starts on the mornings when you wake up with no reason to get out of bed. It comes when you realize that no one is expecting you. It eats away at you little by little, stripping away pieces of who you are, until you are nothing more than a faded shadow of yourself. I have lost so much since coming here, but losing my sense of purpose is the most painful of all. When you no longer matter to others, you begin to wonder, do I even exist? But then I realized that losing my purpose wasn't even the worst part. The worst part is when you still want to live, but your body no longer allows you to. Hard truth number 4. Declining health faster than you expect. There are things no one warns you about. You think you're just resting, but in reality, your body is surrendering. When I was still at home, I never thought about staying healthy. I didn't need an exercise plan, nor did I need anyone to remind me to stay active. Everyday life was my natural workout. I walked around my small garden, bent down to tend to each plant. I stood for hours in the kitchen cooking, carried buckets of water to water my flowers, lifted household items with ease. I never felt myself getting weaker because I used my body every single day. But when I moved into the nursing home, everything became too easy, frighteningly easy. I no longer had to cook, no longer had to clean, no longer needed to go out to shop. All I had to do was press a button and someone would bring me everything I needed. If I felt a little tired, they told me to just sit and rest, they would take care of everything. And I believed that was good for me. I was being taken care of. I could relax. What I didn't realize was that every time I let someone else do something for me, I was slowly stripping away my own strength. At first, my legs just felt a little heavier than usual. Then I noticed I wasn't standing up as much, wasn't walking as often. And then, one day, when I tried to step out of bed, my knees trembled as if they could no longer support me. I grabbed onto the bed frame, panicked. I used to walk just fine, why did I feel this way now? And then I saw the same thing happening to those around me. Alice was a friend I met after moving here. She was once a lively woman, taking morning walks on her own and refusing help unless absolutely necessary. I don't want to become useless, she once told me, but after just 6 months I saw her using a cane. Then, one day, I saw her sitting in a wheelchair. I asked what had happened. She looked at me, her voice filled with sadness. I don't know. I just realized I don't have the strength to stand up anymore. Her words sent chills down my spine. I looked at my own hands and legs, wondering how long it would be before I said the same thing. We weren't sick. We hadn't been in accidents. And yet somehow we were growing weaker at an alarming rate. And the scariest part? We didn't even realize it was happening until it was too late. You think you're being taken care of, but in reality, you're being stripped of the very thing keeping you alive, your ability to move, your ability to care for yourself. Once you lose it, you will never get it back. If I could turn back time, I would do everything I could to hold on to my strength. I wouldn't so easily accept the convenience of having everything done for me. I would keep walking, keep moving, keep fighting to maintain my own power. Because once your body stops working, you don't just lose your ability to walk. You lose your freedom. You lose control over your own life. You become dependent. And that is when you lose your dignity. Hard truth number 5, losing privacy and dignity. Losing my health was already a shock, but losing my privacy and dignity was what truly broke me. When your body weakens, when your legs no longer hold you steady, when you can no longer do even the simplest things on your own, that is when you begin to lose control over your own life. When I was still strong, I never imagined a day would come when I would have to rely on others for the most basic tasks, getting dressed, taking a shower, even just getting out of bed. But that day arrived quietly yet cruelly. One morning, I woke up ready to stand as I always had, but my legs no longer obeyed me. I sat there, staring at my own body, realizing that I was no longer in full control of myself. But losing the ability to care for myself was just the beginning. What I truly lost was my privacy, my self-respect, and the person I used to be. I once had a space of my own. When I wanted peace and quiet, I simply closed the door. I could sleep when I wanted, shower when I pleased, and no one entered my life unless I allowed them to. But in here, I no longer had that choice. I had to share a room with a stranger, someone I never chose. There were nights when I longed for silence, but my roommate kept the light on to read. There were mornings when I wanted to stay in bed a little longer, but the nurse walked in, pulled back the curtains, and woke me up according to their schedule. But the moment I truly understood that I had lost my dignity was the first time I needed someone to help me get dressed. I stood there, helpless, as a young caregiver held out my clothes, gently assisting me in putting them on. I knew they meant no harm. I knew they were just doing their job. But that didn't change the feeling that I was no longer the same person I once was. A person who no longer had control even over his own body. I used to take pride in being able to care for myself. I used to be a strong father, a grandfather my grandchildren admired. But in that moment, I felt like nothing more than an old man, a faded shadow of who I used to be. You might think you wouldn't mind having someone help you, but when it becomes a part of your daily life, when you no longer have the power to decide what happens to your own body, you will realize that losing privacy isn't just about losing a space of your own. It's about losing yourself. And the worst part? Once you lose it, you can never get it back. But there is something even more painful than losing your privacy. It's realizing that when you want to leave, you no longer can. Hard truth number 6, more expensive than you think. Do you think a lifetime of savings will be enough to support you in old age? I used to think so too. And then, I had to face a harsh reality. Nothing is more terrifying than opening your bank account and realizing that the balance is almost zero. That was the moment I felt like my entire life had been wiped away in the blink of an eye. I had already lost my privacy, my freedom, and now I had lost my financial security too. I worked hard my whole life, saved every penny, only to realize that no amount of money is enough to fight against time. When I moved into the nursing home, I thought the costs were reasonable, that everything would be taken care of. My family believed that too. But as the months passed and the bills kept coming, I started to realize I hadn't planned carefully enough. At first, I only noticed the basic expenses: room fees, meals, medical care. But then the extra costs began piling up. A routine health checkup, a dietary adjustment, special nighttime assistance. Each fee seemed small on its own, but little by little they added up, draining my account before I even realized it. I still remember the day my daughter called, her voice filled with worry. "Dad, I just checked your account. There's almost nothing left." I froze. Almost nothing left? How could that be? I had spent my entire life saving for this. I stayed silent throughout the rest of the call. After hanging up, I looked around my room, a room that wasn't my home, a place where I had poured my entire life's savings just to stay. And now I had no idea how much longer I could afford to be here. I never thought I would end up like this, becoming a financial burden on my children when I was already too old to do anything about it. If there's one lesson I want to share, it's this: never underestimate the cost of living in a nursing home. Plan carefully. Consider your options. Do your research before making a decision. Because once you move in, you're not just giving up your freedom and privacy, you might also be giving up your financial security. But the worst part? By the time you've spent everything you have, you'll realize leaving is no longer an option. Hard truth number 7. Once you're in, it's hard to leave. When my money started running out, I began to ask myself, can I leave this place? At first, I always thought of the nursing home as temporary, a short-term solution to help me adjust to old age. I believed that if I didn't like it here, I could simply go back to my old home, back to the life I once had. But then, I realized that nothing was the same anymore. In the first few months, I was still strong, still able to walk on my own, still able to take care of myself. But as time passed, I noticed my body slowing down, growing weaker. When you get used to receiving help, you start to depend on it. And one day, you suddenly realize you're no longer capable of living on your own. But the problem wasn't just my health. It was also money, time, and changes I never expected. My old home, the place I once thought I could return to, was gone. My family had sold it, cleared everything out, thinking it would help me settle in at the nursing home. The belongings I once cherished now existed only in my memories. And then I told my children that I wanted to go home. They looked at me in silence. Finally, one of them spoke. "Dad, are you sure? Here, you have people to take care of you. If you go home, what will you do? Can you take care of yourself?" I didn't know how to answer. I wanted to go home, but could I take care of myself? Did I even have a home to return to? That was when I realized even if I wanted to leave, there was no one waiting for me anymore. If you think moving into a nursing home is a decision you can undo anytime, think again. Once you enter, the way out is nearly impossible. So before you make this choice, be absolutely sure it's what you truly want, because you may never get the chance to go back. I'm not saying that nursing homes are completely terrible. For some people, they may be the best option when specialized medical care is truly needed. But if I could turn back time, I would do everything in my power to hold on to my life a little longer in the place I call home, with the routines I love, with the freedom and dignity I lost when I walked through these doors. If you or a loved one is considering moving into a nursing home, ask yourself, are there other options? Can you receive support from family, from your community, from in-home care services? Can you adjust your lifestyle in a way that allows you to stay independent without sacrificing too much? Don't let temporary convenience cost you everything that makes you you. Old age is not just a time for waiting. It can still be meaningful if you remain in control, if you can still make choices for yourself. Think carefully, because this decision won't just affect a few days or months, it may determine the rest of your life. If you found my story meaningful, please share this video with your loved ones. Don't let someone you care about go through the same regrets I did. And if you want to keep receiving valuable lessons about aging and life, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new post. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. I hope my words help you make a decision you won't regret.